In this series, we're growing a Robinhood account from $0 all the way to 1 million. And I'm showing you every step of the way how I get there with complete transparency. So you can see the wins and losses as we make our way towards that $1 million mark. And you can see that today in the account, we closed at $7,386. If you've been following along, we were up around 10K, but we held on to some positions for too long, mainly on Unity software. But let me just give you a quick rundown of all the positions that we're currently in, and then we'll get into the charts, and I'm gonna give you guys some setups that I'm looking at, as well as some new positions that we just recently entered into. So we've been playing Apple. Apple hasn't really done much for us, so we're probably gonna end up having to roll these out or take a loss on them. Apple's been lagging behind all the other Mag 7, and it just really hasn't moved. It's kind of sitting at that 200 level as Trump threatened additional tariffs on any iPhones that are not made in the US. Then we have Grab. Grab is one of our bigger positions. I'm still bullish on Grab for the long term. I'm starting to sell some options against it out the money. So we have shares as well as long dated call options, and I'm protecting my position at least in the near term and generating some premiums or credits received from selling those options. And we can talk a bit more about that strategy as well. And then NIO, I've kind of abandoned this position a little bit. We still have it on the books, but we're not putting more dollars into it as the company is still burning a lot of cash. We're not sure if they're actually going to be able to meet their profitability target, but we'll learn more by Q4 of this year if they're able to actually make good on that promise. And then really Unity software, this is the one that I'm really trying to play hard. We sized up into this position. We're at $1,750. We're only up 3% so far, but I've been loading this more recently. And if you've been following along in the Discord, I do post all of the positions live, the number of contracts, the specific stock, the strike, the type, the date, and the actual price that I pay. And we did have this previous tracker before. I'm going to start this up again, not only for the challenge account, but also my other portfolio, just so you guys can see like the total profit and loss on these different positions. And then I'm also going to be releasing, so if you're in the Discord, which is completely free, you can join. The link is in the description below. But I also built in an options pricing. This is Black-Scholes model. And you can see how expensive an option is relative to its 30, even 60-day volatility. And then I'm also going to build in the 365 days so you can see over the prior year. So then you know if you should be like a buyer or a seller of options based on the implied volatility on that specific contract. And so make sure you guys check that out. But let's just take a look at the charts. We'll start with the overall market, the S&P 500. You know, I've been kind of just hammering that I'm bullish. I think that the market's going to push to the upside after we had that really strong sell-off when Trump implemented all these different tariffs, and then we had the pause, and then we just kept pushing, and then we had a bit of a consolidation here before reaching all-time highs. This was due to Iran and Israel conflict, and then the U.S. also entered and dropped some bunker busters on a nuclear site that they didn't actually destroy, but they'll just say that they did. And really it just seemed like all theater. Iran was telling us when they were actually going to bomb them and all those things. So all in all, I kind of knew just to keep buying and accumulating in this pattern. At some point we would break out. And then on tech, we actually made it all the way through to all-time highs. And you know, these bull gaps that formed, so there's like this big gap that was on the announcement of US and China trade. I think at some point we're probably going to come back down and test that level, but it's more likely that now that tech has made all-time highs that we're going to see SPY try to break out of this area and push a bit higher and make at least a solid run at some newer highs. But at some point that will probably reject and we'll have a bit of a retest on a lower level out in the future. And really, I'm still bullish overall, and I think that over the coming weeks, like we could see a stronger move on Apple. It's kind of held this 200 level for a period of time. You're also going to see Bitcoin and other cryptos start to run. We had a false breakdown on Bitcoin with Iran and Israel conflict, and then we broke back over, retested, and now we're pushing to the top of this consolidation pattern that's forming on this upper trend line, and that has a pretty solid chance of breaking out, retesting that 109K level, and then making a move to newer highs. So really bullish on crypto, really just bullish overall on equities. Ethereum starting to break out. Ethereum longs are pretty solid right now. You can make a move here on futures to 2560, which is kind of like where, price has rejected before. That would be my first price target. And then you could even see a push to basically $2,700 on Ethereum. So bullish on crypto, bullish on equities. New highs are coming. Grab, this is in the portfolio. This was this drawdown that happened. This was when they raised more additional funds, because they are going to go after some sort of acquisition, whether it be GoTo or Gojek or Food Panda. And you can see here that if you just look at their balance sheet, their net debt is negative $5.5 billion, which means that they can cover their debt by $5.5 billion in cash. So, and they just raised a bit more. It hasn't reflected here since this is historical for Q1. So about like $7.5–8 billion of cash. It's a positive cash flow business. Overall, really strong fundamentals, growing solid. I think Grab is going to try to break this 570 level at some point, but it could take some time. Probably start seeing that move in Q3 or Q4. And then NEO, this one is just down and out. We'll see what happens. It'll probably try to push 4 to 5, maybe even up to 6 if they can achieve profitability. If they can't, this could definitely drop back down to low 3s, even potentially lower than that. So I haven't really added more to this position. I'm just a seller of options on my current position, and then we'll see where things go. And then Disney, this is one that we just recently entered into. We have a few calls on here out into the future. You can see that it broke out of this upper trend line. It broke right here a couple days ago. It came back down, retested this trend line. We started buying options here, and it's starting to bounce. It's also breaking out of this downtrend, right? You can see these green lines. Let me just zoom in for you and clean that up. You can see it broke out of this trend here. So this is a nice little retest and bounce. Hopefully this can continue to the upside. Disney doesn't move all that fast, and it's quite extended already, at least from the April lows. But you can see that there's a low volume shelf here. And when there's low volume, really, price likes to chop when there's a lot of buyers and sellers, and they can do business there, and price kind of chops in that range. And you can see, at least in the historical long run, from like July 2022 all the way to 2025, price has really chopped all through this high volume shelf, and that's created like a pretty solid base. But you can see that when it gets over this like 118 level, it has like a nice little spike to the upside, and that's because there's less volume there. And because there's less volume there, price can move quickly in that area. And so I'm looking to see it come up and actually hit this higher volume shelf, and that will act as resistance. So price might come back up, reject, or it might try to get in here and start consolidating a bit more, and then start trying to hit some of these lower volume nodes. So if you don't have volume profile, I highly recommend that you add it to your charts, because it does help you understand those support and resistance levels and how price is going to behave. Because ultimately, when you are an options trader, not only do you have to be right about the direction of the underlying stock, but you have to be right about the speed at which the price will move in order for you to return a profit by the expiration date of your contract. So very important. And then another one was CRISPR Therapeutics. Not even really sure what this company does. It's like something with gene editing company, right? So I actually have a coworker who just recently left our business to go to a gene sequencing company that I'm not even sure if it uses AI, but nevertheless, that kind of sparked my interest to look back into CRISPR. And then what do you know? It is breaking out to the upside. We just broke this trend line. The implied volatility on contracts has started to increase in this move to the upside. And we have, if we can get through this volume shelf, there's another low volume node at 52.48, and that will likely act as some level of resistance. And so we've entered into some longer dated, I believe October on these 50 calls, and it can make a move to this 52 level. I'm probably just going to take profit there. And then even here on like the shorter term, you can kind of see it's starting to consolidate a bit. It could come back down, retest this 46 level. That would be a retest. If it holds that, then that's bullish, and we can try to get this move to 52.48. So that's what I'm looking on CRISPR. And then last but not least, everyone's favorite stock right now is Unity Software. There has been more bullish flow for Unity Software. They are buying up this position. They're just loading the options chain. And there's a lot of potential catalysts. Obviously, they started with this vector ad tech platform, but I am seeing just on socials, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, I am seeing more and more people talk about Unity and why it might be a potential game changer. Maybe they'll start to steal some market share from AppLovin, which is a much larger business. Unity right now is only a $10 billion market cap. So, it's pretty small in size relative to AppLovin, which is over, I think, 130 billion. So it might be able to clear the gap on that. But looking at the highest open interest contracts, and I can zoom in a bit here, you can see that it's pretty much all green, right? And green is calls, which are bullish. And you can see that there's 85,000 open interest on the 30 call for January. There's 30,000 open interest on the 65 call. These are mostly dead in the water, and they don't really carry a lot of options dealer hedging. So the only way that this will have an impact on price, if price starts to squeeze probably $40, $50 a share. Obviously, the real question is if Roaring Kitty is in this position, which I am 100% convinced that he is in this position, and he's on the 30 call specifically. But there has been some notable flow in the last couple days as price has started to break out of a downtrend. There was some 35 calls for August, which like half of them were at the midpoint. So there was actually some people closing. 35 is like 45% out the money, so it doesn't really make sense. But there was also some flow just recently for November, about $900,000 in a 2.6K block of contracts for 26 calls for November. So that was a bit interesting. But looking at price here, you can see that, it was breaking out to the upside on this upper trend line. It rejected. It was actually breaking over. And this is when our account was launching. We're at 10K. But then the CTO leaving on the create side of the business, which isn't where Vector, the new platform, is. It's on the grow side, left. And then it just tanked the stock. And since then, it's kind of just been chopping down into the right. This has formed a channel. And we actually broke it down. I actually started buying here because this was a higher volume node, as well as a key level looking at historical candles. And then it bounced to the upside, reclaimed this pattern. And then I was just loading in here. It broke out to the upside because usually when you have a false breakdown of a pattern, it's more than likely that it'll swing to the other side and break over it because of that false breakdown. So bulls were in control. Now we're consolidating right above and somewhat of a bull flag in this area. And then we'll likely try to test this 2466 level, which we rejected from, but hopefully we can start making this move back up to this trend line. This trend line is the key level that we're really trying to break because that opens so many doors for the price to move a lot higher. And price does like to move quickly. You can see that, it's trended down here for so long, and now it's trying to form that new trend. It's somewhat of like a bottoming pattern. And this is very similar to how GameStop played out before the initial run in 2021. And that's also one of the reasons why I think Roaring Kitty is in this stock. But nevertheless, we are above this high volume shelf. This low volume node has acted as support. We bounced back up and over it. Really, we're trying to get through a lot of these volume shelves, try to get back up here towards 28.50, and then potentially all the way back up to around $31. But this stock could be explosive if Roaring Kitty tweets about it. Otherwise, I'm really just thinking about playing this as a speculative position. That's why I'm in options only. I do have shares that I'm running somewhat of a covered call, and I talk about that in the Discord and why it's a really, really good strategy with safe returns. So make sure you guys check that out. Join the Discord. I'm just going to keep loading Unity. We want to break this uptrend or this upper green trend line. And if we can get over that, it's going to signal a breakout. Hopefully we can consolidate here and then start trying to get through and start pushing through some of these levels. And then if Roaring Kitty comes in and tweets on top of that, this thing is going to launch. It could go 31, it could go 43, it could go even higher than that, just depending on how many people on social media. The coordinated buying could force a gamma squeeze with how much the options chain is loaded with all of those call contracts. So I hope you learned something in this video. Make sure you guys drop a like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord. I'm going to be hosting live calls in there as well, just talking to you guys. You can ask me questions. We're going to run this shit up in 2025, guys. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Peace.